Picture this: velvet drapes swaying in the candlelight, golden wines spilling onto marble floors, and half-naked dancers performing for a ruler whose every whim is law. This wasn't a dream. It was the daily reality of Rome's emperors. Among Rome's emperors, Septimius Severus stood out, not for scandalous affairs or unrestrained indulgence, but for a different kind of passion: fierce loyalty to one woman. Yet even this devotion carried its own shadows. His wife, Julia Domna, wasn't just a consort, she was a political force. Educated, ambitious, and deeply involved in court affairs, she advised Severus on imperial policy and surrounded herself with philosophers, artists, and scholars. Together, they formed a rare imperial partnership, built on shared vision but also on control. Though Severus remained unusually faithful by imperial standards, their marriage wasn't free of manipulation. Julia held immense influence over his court, often acting as a gatekeeper to the emperor himself. Her intelligence made her indispensable, but her ambition made her feared. She outlasted her husband, guided their sons' reigns, and cemented her place in Roman politics. Still, behind the image of unity, ancient sources hint at tensions, power struggles, jealousy, and rumors of infidelities on both sides, though none ever confirmed. In a court defined by seduction and betrayal, Severus and Julia played a different game, ruling together, loving strategically, and never letting the empire forget who truly held the reins. Caligula's reign is remembered not just for cruelty, but for carnality without restraint. Power to him was a license to violate every boundary, including those of blood. He didn't just desire his sisters, he flaunted them. At banquets, he paraded Drusilla, his favorite, as if she were his queen. Rumors swirled that he took her to bed regularly, sometimes in full view of guests. When Drusilla died, Caligula wept like a widower. He even declared her a goddess, as if to sanctify the taboo they shared. But his appetite didn't end with Drusilla. He reportedly had relations with his other sisters too, Livilla and Agrippina, sometimes all on the same night. These weren't quiet affairs. He humiliated their husbands, mocked tradition, and twisted family into fantasy. For Caligula, incest wasn't shameful, it was theatrical, a demonstration that Roman laws, morals, and gods were beneath him. His palace was a stage, and every boundary he broke became part of the act. What others whispered in shadows, Caligula performed under chandeliers. He wasn't just mad, he was deliberate and terrifyingly proud of it. Caligula's reign was a masterpiece of excess, and nowhere was that more evident than on the water. Tired of the land's limitations, he ordered the construction of enormous floating palaces on Lake Nemi. These weren't ordinary boats, they were floating temples of indulgence, filled with gold, marble, and sin. Historians describe these ships as lavish beyond belief, complete with banquet halls, heated baths, and beds draped in silk. But their true purpose wasn't naval exploration, it was decadence. Caligula reportedly used the ships to host extravagant parties and sensual feasts, inviting Rome's elite, entertainers, and chosen companions for nights of unchecked pleasure. These vessels became moving islands of temptation, sailing in circles while music played and wine flowed like water. No rule applied, except Caligula's whim. Guests were expected to entertain and indulge, or be replaced. To the emperor, these ships were more than toys, they were symbols of his divine status, a floating challenge to Rome's morality. While the empire watched in disbelief, Caligula drifted across the lake, wrapped in fantasy. Centuries later, the wreckage of those ships was discovered, confirming the legends were no exaggeration. Even water couldn't wash away his madness. In Rome, few roles were held in higher spiritual regard than the Vestal Virgins. Sworn to 30 years of celibacy, they were guardians of Rome's sacred flame, symbols of purity, duty, and divine favor. To violate a Vestal's vow was more than scandalous, it was sacrilege. So when Emperor Elagabalus married one, Rome was stunned. Her name was Aquilia Severa, a Vestal chosen by Elagabalus not despite her vow, but because of it. He claimed their union would unite the sun god he worshipped with Rome's most sacred traditions. In his eyes, it was a divine match. To everyone else, it was blasphemy. The marriage defied centuries of Roman law. Breaking a Vestal's vow was punishable by death, but as emperor, Elagabalus was above punishment, and Aquilia lived. Still, the outrage was immediate. Senators protested, priests were horrified, yet Elagabalus dismissed them all. He divorced her soon after, only to remarry her later, deepening the scandal. To Elagabalus, religion, sex, and spectacle were inseparable. But to Rome, this was an emperor who shattered their holiest line. Domitian ruled Rome like a man constantly under siege. Paranoid, secretive, and obsessed with control, he demanded absolute obedience from senators, soldiers, and even his lovers. To him, intimacy was just another form of domination. He took pleasure in surveillance, often spying on members of his court, recording their conversations, and punishing those who stepped out of line, publicly or privately. Behind palace doors, he extended this need for control to his relationships. Partners were expected to meet his every demand without hesitation, and his mood swings made love a dangerous game. His wife, Domitia Longina, was both favored and feared. At one point, he exiled her for suspected infidelity, only to bring her back, perhaps out of loneliness or perhaps to assert power once again. Rumors whispered through Rome that Domitian indulged in secret affairs, unusual rituals, and acts meant not for love, but for surveillance and submission. Even in pleasure, Domitian couldn't stop watching. Every embrace came with suspicion, every moment of closeness another test of loyalty. For Domitian, love wasn't trust. It was a trap he set for everyone around him. Marcus Aurelius is remembered as Rome's philosopher king, a man of discipline, wisdom, and stoic virtue. But even the most thoughtful emperor couldn't escape the scandals of the palace. And in his case, the storm swirled around his wife, Faustina the Younger. While Marcus was often away on military campaigns, Faustina remained in Rome. Ancient gossip painted her as restless, claiming she engaged in multiple affairs with gladiators, actors, and courtiers. Some whispered that Marcus knew, but chose to remain silent, valuing harmony over confrontation. Others believed he was simply too absorbed in his writings and wars to notice. Despite the rumors, Marcus always treated Faustina with deep respect. He honored her publicly, defended her memory after her death, and even had her deified. His writings speak of her with admiration, not bitterness. Was he blind to her alleged affairs, or did he love her enough to rise above them? Whatever the truth, their marriage stands as one of the most mysterious in Roman history. A stoic emperor who preached self-control, paired with a wife surrounded by scandal. Even the wisest ruler couldn't always master the chaos of love. Caracalla ruled with a sword in one hand and paranoia in the other. His reign was soaked in blood, and his passions, like his politics, were driven by force, not affection. Wherever he went, fear followed. He idolized Alexander the Great, and sought to imitate not just his conquests, but his rumored personal life. Caracalla surrounded himself with young male companions and gladiators, not out of love, but domination. He demanded loyalty, flattery, and complete submission, using intimacy as a tool for control. Those who disappointed him often vanished or were killed outright. His obsession with power extended even to his family. Ancient sources accuse him of desiring his own brother's wife and later ordering the murder of his brother Geta in their mother's arms. The brutality didn't end there. After Geta's death, Caracalla launched a purge. Thousands were slaughtered simply for having been close to his sibling. In Caracalla's world, desire and violence were inseparable. He didn't seek pleasure, he sought ownership, and he took it with cruelty. To Rome, he was an emperor. To those closest to him, he was a shadow no one could escape. Poppaea Sabina was more than a beauty. She was sharp, ambitious, and captivating. Nero fell under her spell completely. But what began as passion soon spiraled into something darker: obsession. Poppaea was married to Otho, one of Nero's closest allies, before the emperor demanded her for himself. Otho was exiled, and Poppaea took her place beside Nero, first as a mistress, then as empress. She wielded influence with elegance and cruelty, persuading Nero to eliminate rivals, including his own mother. Nero lavished her with gifts, titles, and devotion, but he was also volatile. As her pregnancy advanced, a violent argument reportedly ended with Nero striking her in a fit of rage. The blow proved fatal, and Poppaea died, along with their unborn child. Grief consumed him. Nero ordered her embalmed in spices, laid in a golden tomb, and even built statues in her honor. But guilt didn't stop the emperor from continuing his descent. Some say his later marriage to Sporus, a boy he had physically altered, was an attempt to recreate Poppaea, down to the clothes and name. To the Roman people, Commodus was a spectacle. To his court, he was a storm, unpredictable, vain, and deeply obsessed with power. Unlike emperors who led armies or passed laws, Commodus preferred the arena. He dressed as a gladiator, fought staged battles, and demanded applause. But his thirst for domination didn't stop in the Colosseum. Behind closed doors, Commodus ruled not with love, but with ownership. He surrounded himself with concubines, slaves, and performers, men and women alike, chosen not for affection, but submission. They were costumes in his private theater, where he was always the star. He renamed Rome itself in his image, calling it Colonia Commodiana, and forced senators to bow before his statues dressed as Hercules. At home, he acted out similar scenes of command and fantasy, blurring the line between emperor, performer, and god. Those closest to him lived in fear, never knowing if they'd be rewarded, discarded, or destroyed. For Commodus, intimacy wasn't about connection, it was about conquest. Every embrace was a power play. He ruled the empire like a stage, and in the end, his own show consumed him. Galba's reign was short, brutal, and marked by cold detachment. Unlike many emperors before him, Galba showed little interest in pleasure or passion. He was austere to the point of cruelty, refusing lavish displays, punishing waste, and ignoring the extravagance that had defined Imperial Rome. But there was one exception, a freedman named Icelus. Icelus was no ordinary servant. Elevated from humble origins, he became Galba's trusted companion and confidant, one of the few people allowed into his private life. Ancient sources suggest that their bond may have gone beyond politics and loyalty, hinting at a relationship that blurred personal and professional lines. Galba, who had no wife or known romantic partner, relied heavily on Icelus, granting him immense influence at court. Some accused Icelus of manipulating the emperor for personal gain. Others claimed he served a more intimate role. Whether the rumors were true or the product of political smear campaigns, Icelus's power was undeniable. And when Galba fell, Icelus fell with him, executed by rivals who despised his closeness to the throne. In a world of indulgence, Galba was an exception, cold, calculating, and quietly entangled with one man who knew too much. Lucius Verus co-ruled the Roman Empire alongside Marcus Aurelius, but the two men couldn't have been more different. While Marcus was philosophical and disciplined, Lucius lived for pleasure. And for Lucius, pleasure meant excess. He surrounded himself with luxury, gold-plated furniture, rare perfumes, dancers, and entertainers from every corner of the empire. His nights were filled with music, wine, and sensual indulgence. He treated the imperial palace like a private festival, hosting feasts that lasted for days and inviting actors and courtesans into the most sacred halls of Rome. Verus had a special taste for spectacle. He reportedly traveled with an entourage of lovers and jesters, and even on military campaigns, he maintained a lavish lifestyle, preferring silk robes to armor. Roman soldiers grumbled as their commander partied while they prepared for war. Though married to Lucilla, the daughter of Marcus Aurelius, Verus's attention wandered constantly. His flings were well known, and his disregard for decorum left Rome's moralists fuming. To some, Lucius Verus was charming and carefree. To others, he was an emperor lost in indulgence. In the end, he left behind no grand legacy, only the echo of laughter, music, and a reign drowned in excess. Chapter 7. Hadrian and Antinous, Love, Loss, and the Deification of Desire. Hadrian was one of Rome's more disciplined and philosophical emperors, builder of walls, lover of Greek culture, and a patron of art. But beneath his stoic image lay a story of deep, haunting passion. That story was Antinous. Antinous was a young Greek from Bithynia, beautiful, quiet, and mysterious. Hadrian became utterly captivated by him, bringing him into the imperial circle, traveling the empire with him, and treating him not just as a companion, but as something far more personal. Their closeness shocked the Roman elite, though such relationships were not unheard of in elite circles of the time. Then, suddenly, Antinous drowned in the Nile. The details remain murky. Some whisper of sacrifice, others of despair. Hadrian was shattered, but instead of moving on, he did something no emperor had done before. He declared Antinous a god. Temples were built, statues rose across the empire, coins bore his face. An entire city, Antinopolis, was named in his memory. This wasn't just grief, it was obsession immortalized. In death, Antinous became divine, and Hadrian ensured his beauty and their bond would never fade. Nero didn't just break the rules of Rome, he rewrote them in his image. Known for artistic flair and theatrical madness, his sexual life followed no logic but his own. And in Nero's world, even gender didn't matter, only submission and spectacle. He married Sporus, a young boy whom he had castrated and then publicly wed in a lavish ceremony. Sporus wore the bridal veil, was treated as an empress, and accompanied Nero as his wife through Rome. The emperor would kiss him in public, call him by the name of his dead wife, and force the court to treat the boy as royalty. But Nero didn't stop there. He later took another man, Doryphorus, as a husband. This time, Nero played the bride. In that union, he wore the veil, moaned like a woman, and subjected himself to his new groom. For Nero, gender roles were playthings, and dignity was meaningless. To some, this was madness. To Nero, it was performance, twisted, theatrical, and entirely within his imperial right. He didn't love, he possessed, and in doing so, he turned Rome's moral core into a burning stage. Elagabalus became emperor of Rome as a teenager, but his rule was anything but typical. Dressed in silks instead of armor, he embraced the divine and the dramatic, blending religion, fashion, and identity in ways that stunned the Roman elite. He rejected the strict roles expected of a Roman man and openly defied traditional norms. Elagabalus often wore makeup, jewelry, and elaborate gowns, appearing in public with the grace and style of a royal bride rather than a military leader. He preferred to be addressed in feminine terms and reportedly asked to be called a lady by those closest to him. His court became a whirlwind of flamboyance and controversy. He surrounded himself with exotic priests, dancers, and performers, mixing spiritual rituals with sensuality. Roman historians, scandalized by his behavior, claimed he even sought out surgical procedures unheard of in his time to change his body. But beneath the glitter and gold lay a deep challenge to Roman identity itself. Elagabalus wasn't just eccentric, he was revolutionary, turning his very body into a symbol of defiance. Rome called it chaos, he called it truth. When much of Rome burned in 64 CE, Nero didn't mourn, he built. Rising from the ashes came the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. More than a palace, it was a monument to Nero's ego and desires. Stretching over hundreds of acres, it was decorated in gold leaf, precious stones, and painted ceilings that rotated like the heavens above. But the real spectacle wasn't in the decor, it was in the purpose. The Golden House was Nero's personal stage for indulgence. He filled it with gardens, fountains, and artificial lakes, and populated it with artists, actors, servants, and companions ready to serve his every fantasy. Banquets went on for days, wine poured endlessly. Guests were hand-picked for beauty, not status. Hidden rooms and secret passages led to chambers designed for intimacy and entertainment. Nero reportedly roamed the halls in costume, singing, performing, and selecting whomever caught his eye. For him, pleasure was performance, and this palace was the theater. To the Roman people, it was a shocking display of extravagance built on tragedy. To Nero, it was home. The Golden House didn't just reflect his power, it reflected the empire crumbling under it. From Tiberius's hidden island to Elagabalus's sacred scandal, Rome's emperors didn't just wield power, they embodied it in flesh, fantasy, and domination. Their desires weren't private, they were political, public, and dangerous. These rulers blurred the line between personal appetite and imperial control. Pleasure became policy, seduction became a weapon, and the imperial bedroom became a reflection of Rome itself. Opulent, ruthless, and teetering on the edge of chaos. Some emperors used sex to manipulate, others used it to rebel against Rome's traditions. A few were consumed by it entirely, turning the empire into a stage for their fantasies. For them, love was rarely about connection, it was about status, spectacle, and submission. Their stories are more than gossip, they're warnings. Rome's most powerful men built monuments to desire, but in doing so, they helped rot the foundation of the empire itself. Otho's rise to power was quick, and so was his downfall. But before he ever wore the imperial purple, he was entangled in one of the most scandalous love triangles in Roman history, the affair with Poppaea Sabina, Nero's infamous second wife. Poppaea was known for her beauty and ambition. Before Nero claimed her, she was married to Otho. By all accounts, their relationship was intense, too intense for Nero to ignore. Consumed by jealousy and desire, Nero exiled Otho to a distant province and took Poppaea for himself. Rather than risk rebellion, Otho stayed silent, watching as the woman he loved became the Empress of Rome. Poppaea would later die under mysterious circumstances, reportedly kicked by Nero while pregnant. But Otho never forgot her. When he eventually seized power after Galba's fall, some believed he ruled in her memory. Though his reign lasted just 3 months, Otho's story was shaped as much by love and rivalry as politics and war. His relationship with Poppaea didn't just cost him his marriage, it cost him his place in Rome, until fate gave him one final, tragic shot at glory. Beneath their public glory, military victories, Senate speeches, and divine titles, lay a private world soaked in lust and unchecked desire. These emperors weren't merely rulers, they believed they were gods, and with godhood came a license to indulge in the most bizarre and taboo pleasures imaginable. Some slept with their sisters, others married slaves or animals in mock ceremonies. There were orgies in royal halls, boys dressed as brides, and brutal punishments for denying pleasure. The imperial bedroom was a playground of extremes, where love, power, and cruelty merged. This series dives deep into that forbidden world. We'll uncover the perverse cravings of emperors like Caligula, Nero, and Tiberius. Their twisted sex lives didn't just shock Rome, they defined it. Prepare yourself. The real Roman Empire wasn't just built on conquest, it was built on obsession. Claudius was never meant to be emperor. Shy, stammering, and often mocked, he was seen as weak by Rome's elite. But when chaos consumed the empire, Claudius rose to power and proved far more cunning than anyone expected. Still, for all his political intelligence, his private life was a whirlwind of betrayal and humiliation. He married 4 times, but it was his last 2 wives who left the deepest mark and the deepest scars. Messalina, his 3rd wife, was infamous for her unrestrained appetites. While Claudius worked late in the palace, she reportedly hosted secret lovers and, according to scandalous rumors, even competed in brothels under disguise. When her affairs became too public to ignore, Claudius had her executed, devastated and humiliated in equal measure. But his next wife, Agrippina the Younger, brought a different kind of danger. She manipulated Claudius into adopting her son Nero and slowly gained power within the court. Some say she eventually poisoned Claudius to make way for Nero's rise. Despite his brilliance as a statesman, Claudius was no match for the ambition of the women he loved. In the Empire of Rome, even the bedroom could be a battlefield.